finishing introduction, let's move on to our body paragraph. And in advanced essays, we may have 2 body paragraphs or 4 body paragraphs. Well, the number of body paragraphs depends on your preferences, because there is no clear instruction or there's no clear limitation or rule on how many body paragraphs should you have. You may have 2 body paragraphs, you may have 3 or 4 body paragraphs if you wish. So what they want from you, what exactly is required from you, is giving clear arguments and giving arguments in a right cohesive way. So you're not required to write or 4 body paragraphs or 2 body paragraphs. So in this part, we're going to adopt 4 body paragraph approach, and we're going to give at least 2 advantages and 2 disadvantages. And in these disadvantages will be given in overall for number 4, like 4 advantages and disadvantages will be given in separate body paragraphs. So 2 advantages in body paragraph 1 and body paragraph 2, 2 disadvantages body paragraph 3, and body paragraph 4. Before starting on a body paragraph or before starting to write an essay, what we have to do is we have to brainstorm the topic and we have to come up with ideas. And here we were talking about tourism and tourism advantages and tourism disadvantages. Now you have to think about the advantages and disadvantages of tourism on the country as a whole and come up with clear arguments and clear advantages to support in your body paragraphs. And here you have to pay attention that you're not basically scored on the level of your ideas. If you have slightly biased ideas, you're gonna get good score, but your ideas should make logical sense. They should be logically valid, and they shouldn't be childish. So they should be like academic and logical arguments. And in this part, so let's talk about advantages and disadvantages of tourism. I'm just gonna draw a table here, and we're gonna talk about advantages and disadvantages of tourism. And here I'm just gonna write plus because it's advantage and minus because it's disadvantage. Now if you talk about advantages and disadvantages of this topic, tourism, and let's talk about advantages first. The first advantage is the benefit to country's economy. For example, if tourists come, so in this part you have to pay attention to the fact that when you're giving ideas, when you're giving arguments, when you're giving advantages or disadvantages as well, you have to pay attention to backing them up with valid arguments, with valid discussion part. Because if you give good advantage, good argument, if you don't discuss it in a right way, in a proper way, you're not going to get high score. If you give bad advantage or off topic or slightly invalid advantage, and if you give this good discussion, you're not going to get good score. So you have both things. You have to have good advantage, in logically correct way, and you have to have good discussion part of it. And then if you have to back it up, it's optional by the way, you have to have good examples. And here we write for advantages, economic benefits. And how do you explain this economic benefits part? Well, imagine when the person is coming to some particular country to visit, he's gonna spend money on several things like the hotel stay, buying souvenirs, going to attractions. So it's going to bring funds, it's going to bring benefits to country's economy. So that's why we wrote economic benefits. And in this, another example or another advantage may be prestige. Improved image or prestige of the country. So basically what we have to do is we have to give at least 2 advantages and 2 disadvantages, because if we're going to give 1 advantage, 1 disadvantage, it's not going to be enough, and our essay is not going to be well developed, and we will not have enough words. 250 word limit, we will not reach 250 word limit if we have only 1 advantage and 1 disadvantage. So the optimal number of arguments that we should have is 2 advantages and 2 disadvantages. And here we gave already 2 advantages, and we can give additional information, additional advantages, but it's not going to be necessary for us, because if we give more than 2 advantages, imagine you're giving 3 advantages or 4 advantages, you're going to have to write at least 250 words or maximum 350 words. But as we said at the beginning, perfect word limit, word count is 280 or 270 words. It means that if you want to write a lot of if you want to give a lot of advantages or 3 or 4 advantages, you're not going to be able to describe them in a proper way, because to describe one advantage properly, you're going to have to write around 50 words. So it means that if you write 50 words for one advantage, 50 words for second advantage, so it's going to be already 100 words. And for disadvantage also, you have to write 100 words. As you saw, our introduction was around 40 words or even 50 words. And in our conclusion, we're going to write around 20-30 words. That's why. So 2 advantages are optimal. Well, 2 advantages are just the best option here we have. If you want to give 3 or more advantages, it's okay, but there's a risk of not being able to develop them properly. Now let's look at the disadvantages side of having tourism or developing tourism, and one of them is pollution. Well, we wrote air pollution, ground pollution. You can write water pollution. Well, it depends on how wide of the scope that you are covering. For example, when we're talking about air pollution, we're talking mainly about transportation, because tourists have to locate or move from one place to another place, and that's why they're gonna use they're gonna use various transport means. They're gonna use taxis. They're gonna use mostly air travel, and this is gonna lead to the atmosphere being polluted. It's one of the basic arguments. And in addition to that, tourists may go and pollute the areas that they're visiting, because if you see, in most cases, when we go somewhere, this area will be mostly polluted, and you can see this in documentaries also. And tourism and people coming will inevitably lead to pollution happening there and pollution occurring there. And now let's just think more about this disadvantages part of tourism. We can just say destruction of natural heritage. Cultural heritage. In this case, what we mean by this is that when we visit some places, or when anyone goes to some place, there's inevitable imminent chance of them just contacting with it and destroying some part of it, even lead to the ruin of this area. So this one, it may be difficult to support and give arguments, but it's one of the obvious disadvantages of tourism. We can add more information like potential conflicts that may emerge between tourists and native people, native inhabitants, because when tourism develops, when there are people who are coming from other countries, there will be invariably clash of interests, clash of cultures, clash of traditions, and they will not be able to understand our traditions, will not be able to understand other people's traditions that we are visiting, and they may lead to some kind of potential clashes in extreme cases. Well, these are the possible advantages and disadvantages that we are going to develop and we're going to discuss in our body paragraphs. And now after this, we start our first body paragraph, and we will discuss and we will describe our first advantage. And now let's start writing our first body paragraph. And here, what we have to pay attention to is, as we saw in our introduction, in our task 1 essays, what we have to do is we have to find some sort of templates in order to be able to accomplish our task properly. Because as we said in previous essays, previous lessons, what we're dealing with here is not being able to write an essay, but being able to write an essay on time in a proper way. So the templates that we are going to memorize and that we're going to learn will help us to increase our chances of finishing our essay on time and giving good vocabulary and good grammar structure. And the reason why we have to memorize these templates is we need good grammar structures and good vocabulary structures. And if we are going to learn these structures, memorize the structures, it's going to be beneficial for your lexical resources and grammar range and accuracy. And I'm just going to use a red marker to give this template so that it will be stand out from other ordinary information in this part. And we start turning to the potential positive sides and turning to the potential merits of the situation. Well, let's start. And after this, turning to the potential positive sides of, then you can say simply yet, because we already discussed the topic, and we can just use the reference word yet to refer to the topic itself, or instead of yet, we can say this phenomenon or this situation or this condition, or simply, but we can just directly paraphrase the topic again, and we can say of tourism. Simply, we have several choices, but in this part I'm just gonna write this phenomenon so that it will be better for your vocabulary, and you can use this structure over and over again in other advantage disadvantage essays too. So I'm gonna write what's the size of this phenomenon. So it means if we look at the advantages of this situation, and we just continue our structure. So we said the most prominent and crucial. So here we are trying to use superlative form of adjective, the most, and we are using the words prominent and crucial. They are quite advanced vocabulary. So if you're going to use them, you're going to get higher score from your less good resources. And we say the most prominent and crucial one would probably be, and we just continue with our first advantage. And this will be the end of our first sentence. And this sentence was actually the first sentence of our body paragraph. And there are a lot of things that we have to pay attention to. The first thing that we have to pay attention to will be, I just forgot to mention this, the basic structure of our body paragraphs. As I said, in all body paragraphs, whatever body paragraph it is, we're going to have the basic structure, the same structure for all situations. And this situation is and as you see in this part, no matter what kind of body paragraph we are giving, whether it is advantage, disadvantage essay, whether it is problem solution essay, cause and effect essay, or opinion argument essays, no matter what kind of essay it is, you are going to start your body paragraph with first argument. And the first argument in this case is our first advantage. We just give you first advantage first. And then in the second part, you discuss it, you explain it. So we can just invariably say this is the first sentence. And in this part, we just give this arguments that we have. In the second part, we just discuss it and explain it. And we just give our arguments to support our opinion as much as possible. In the third part, if we can, we will give example. And as it's written here, it is optional. So if you want to give, you can give. If you don't want to give, you don't have to give it. And your score will not be lowered because you didn't give example sentence. And here the structure is turning to the potential possible sides of the phenomenon. This phenomenon is the most prominent and crucial one would probably be. And here what we have to do is we have to look at certain things. So this is a basic structure. I'm just going to underline so that you're going to write it down to your notebook too and copy and memorize it. And the second thing that we have to pay attention to is I wrote here one, and by one, the word one was given to avoid using the word positive side again. So this word was simply used to paraphrase or to use instead of this the word positive side. And as you saw here, if you want to paraphrase the word, if you don't want to use the word again, but you don't have any other choice but use the same word again, you can just use the word one to paraphrase the topic here, paraphrase the words here. As the next part that I have to talk about is would probably be. Why we use the structure would probably be? Not simply to be form yes. And the reason is we had to use the tentative structure here. And the tentative structure is In tentative structure, what you have to do is you have to show that it's not certain, the life is not certain, like there will be exceptions always, and it's not 100% certain what you are thinking may be wrong or may be right. So you have to show that it's not 100% possibility, and you have to show that there's probability of this thing happening, and you have to use languages of probability instead of 100% certainty, like yes, must be, should be, and you have to use it like possibility, like modal verbs of possibility, like would probably be, would possibly be, can be, maybe, could be, might be. And as you saw in this part, we learned two things. We learned basic structure of body paragraph, giving first arguments and discussion, explanation part and examples. Then we learned how to use tentative language and why we have to use tentative language. As we said, if we use tentative language, we are going to show that we're not sure and we're considering other sides of the argument, and we're going to get higher task achievement score. And in addition to this, we learned the basic structure that we can use to start our first body paragraph. And the benefit, the upside of this kind of structures is that imagine you may not have, in situations that the topic is really tough and challenging, you may not have ideas to give, and you may have problems with coming up with 250 words. And in this kind of situations, these kind of structures come in handy very much, because if you write this structure, for example, here we have 3, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18 words. And here, by writing this structure, you're going to write 18 words from just thin air, meaning that you don't have to think, you don't have to use any imagination, creativity to come up with these words, and you're just going to benefit using the structure in terms of coming up with 250 words. Here we have 18 words, and after you give your first advantage, it's going to be around 20 words. So the first advantage will be, here we wrote first advantage would probably be, and we said benefit for economy of the country would be benefit for country's economy. And after the sentence, then you're going to explain what do you mean by country's economy, how it's going to happen. For example, if you want to say, well, if tourists spend money there, so it's going to benefit your country's economy, but you have to explain it properly with right language in the next part of your body paragraph sentence. And now what we have to do is we have to move on to discussion part of our essay, a discussion part of our body paragraph. And now, as you heard, we have to continue our body paragraph with discussion, and we have to choose certain structures to explain our discussion part. We can use participle clause, we can use relative clause, we can use conditionals. So what we have to, whatever we use, we have to make sure that we're going to write a good, structured, well-structured part, well-structured sentence to improve our grammar range and accuracy score. So simply in this part, so that it will be easier for you, we're going to use conditionals. So we say if So as you see, we just simply explain the sentence like, if tourists visit a country, they will obviously spend large sums of money on accommodation, food, and souvenirs. So in this part, it was very basic. It is like worth around 6 or around 6. So we just give here 6 band score. Um, and in this part, we can continue our discussion. And so in this part, we can continue our discussion. And here we can use the structure this will lead to. So this in this part is reference word. And by this, we're saying we're referring to the thing that happened before or the action that happened before. So we write this will. And as you see, we tried to explain further how this is gonna lead to more money for the government and for country's economy. And we said this will invariably result in revenues. And in this part, we can just use the structure this as a linker. Simple sentence linker, or we can use simply, we can continue the sentence, we can say which will invariably lead to. And in this part, we're using relative clause and we say which will invariably result in. It's good structure. We can say lead to or bring about instead of this word revenues to the government in forms of taxes from local businesses. And we are saying that this tourists are going to enrich local business, and local businesses are going to pay taxes to the government and fees collected from local amenities, because these tourists are going to visit local amenities and they're going to pay some amount of fee to have access to these places. And in this part, you can use this as a direct example of the point, but if you want, you can give examples, real life examples to support your argument here in as the third part of our essay. And here after this we can give examples which are optional. So when you're giving examples, you have to be a little bit careful. What I mean is, when you're giving examples, you have to pay attention to what kind of examples are you giving. And here you're not allowed to give, or it's not the right word to say you're not allowed to give. It's not a good idea to give 4 kinds of examples. So here I'll just gonna explain you what kind of evidences can we give. So when we're giving evidence or when we're giving example, so we cannot give certain things, and they are and here we try to explain what kind of evidences you cannot give. And one of them is statistics. Well, most students try to give statistics like 50% of tourists spend more than $1,000 when they come to Uzbekistan. Well, there are 2 problems with this kind of statistics. The first problem is, well, actually, when you're writing an essay, most students, if we are honest with ourselves, most students try to make up, they try to invent these statistics from their head, so thinking that they will not be caught, and the examiner will not have any suspicion that this person made this statistics up, and they will not think that, well, it's gonna be good. But you have to be 100% sure that when you're going to exams, you're gonna get the same this same topic as others, and from like 100 people, around 10, at least 10 people will want to give some kind of specific example. And imagine when they are giving specific examples, statistics, they're gonna make this word numbers up. And even if you have correct statistics, these statistics would seem to be wrong, because they will give wrong statistics, and it will lead to your statistic being not correct. So examiner will think that everyone is making up these statistics, and you will not get high score for this statistics here. And another reason why statistics is not a good idea is because it's just too detailed. And in your essay, you have to make sure that any person with proficient English language will be able to understand your ideas and will be understand your concepts. And here, giving statistics will make it hard for the person to understand your ideas. And in the next part is personal examples. By personal examples, we mean your examples from your life. Well, in tasks, in criteria of the task, they will mostly say give examples from your personal life, but it doesn't mean that you have to give examples from your individual life. For example, you cannot talk about your parents, your friends, or your cousin, or even your city or neighborhood. You have to generalize this idea as much as possible. You have to at least talk about Uzbekistan, or simply one city in your country, because if you give too specific example, it will not illustrate, it will not show the situation around the world, so it will not be a valid argument for the support of your argument. And here in the next part we said individual examples. There are some cases when you can give individual examples to support your idea, like mostly individual topics. Most students write some people like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Ronaldo. This is give individual people as examples, but you have to understand that never, in any case, in no case, a person, individual person, can be example of one category. So in this case, what you have to pay attention to is you shouldn't give individual person as an example. You should give at least groups or regions. And the last part is specific concept. By specific concept, we mean terms and specific complicated structures in a certain field. Imagine the topic is about economics, and here we have tourism, and we touched upon economic concepts related to tourism. But if you just start giving some kind of macroeconomic concepts, then it will be really confusing for me. I will not be able to understand, and it will make your essay less persuasive and less convincing. So you have to make sure that everyone understands your ideas, and you have to use general obvious concepts to explain your arguments, and you have to use groups or regions as examples. And here this was the end of giving evidence. And in addition to giving evidence, we have more advanced structure, which is evaluating evidence, which we will go through in the next in further part of our IELTS course, because this is going to be really it's going to be really complex now, and it will be really hard to understand. So at the beginning, in this part, we just use the structure of giving evidence as a simple form of example. And in the next part, as we improve our skills, we just start evaluating evidence too. And when you're giving evidence, the best structure is just simply giving for example. And in this part, you can give any country as an example here. For example, imagine you can just give France or India, or you can just give any country with good cultural amenities, or just touristic areas, or good touristic industry. We can simply say countries support. So in this part, we just gave example of Vietnam and Maldives, and we said, for example, countries with developed tourism industry such as Vietnam and Maldives mainly rely on tourism to support the economy of the country, And this part, it was one of the obvious examples that we could give, and it's not that strong example, but it's worth giving. And here it was the end of our first body paragraph. As you saw, we gave our first advantage, then we tried to discuss it and explain it, and at the end we just backed it up with our examples, and we gave example of Vietnam and Maldives here. So they were regions, and this is valid example. As you saw, we didn't use any statistics, any personal example, any individual examples, or specific context. We just gave one reason and obvious concept here.